SDPB brings South Dakotans together, telling the stories that unite small towns, big ideas, and the people who make our state shine. Good, useful, and full of wonder. SDPB. SDPB shares the voices and experiences of South Dakotans, preserving our stories, our culture, and our sense of place. SDPB, good, useful, and full of wonder.
The meeting of the House Commerce and Energy is now called to order. We welcome everybody that's here today to testify and observe, and also everybody that is listening online. Reminder to please turn your cell phone to silent. Lobbyists, make sure that you're wearing your badge. And testifiers must sign the guest register, and Pages will distribute any handouts that you might have. A reminder as well, all testimony and questions will be directed through the chair. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representatives Elward.
Here.
Duffy excused. Greenfield excused. Kaiser.
Here.
Mullally.
Here.
Knowles excused. Peterson excused. Schwann's excused. Shorma.
Here.
Uri Balk excused. Weisgram.
Here.
Baumler.
Present.
Lems.
Here.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Baumiller, second by Kaiser to accept the minutes of the last meeting. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. All right, do we have Pages in the room? If I could, I'm going to invite you up. Please come up and introduce yourselves. Give us your name, where you're from, and your future plans.
Hi, my name is Lily Sortland. I'm from Rapid City Central, and I plan on pursuing engineering after high school.
Very good.
My name is Jenica Koistinen. I'm from Lake Norden, and I plan to go into computer science.
Okay. Pleasure to have you guys with us for the next couple weeks. All right. With that, we will jump right into our agenda for the day. We have Senate Bill 98, which is Prevent Virtual Currency Kiosk Fraud. And Representative Weisgram will let you kick it off today.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Representative Mike Weisgram from District 24. And I bring you SB 98. SB 98 is a consumer protection bill which will prevent virtual currency kiosk fraud. For those of you who are unfamiliar with a virtual currency kiosk, it's a physical internet-connected terminal that allows users to exchange cash for cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin. They are located in places like convenience stores, gas stations, bars, and restaurants. People use virtual currency kiosks to conduct legitimate cryptocurrency transactions, but unfortunately, they've also become a common tool for scammers. Criminals use virtual currency kiosks to steal millions of dollars from customers each year. SB 98 addresses virtual currency kiosk fraud and protects South Dakotans by licensing virtual currency kiosk operators with the state, setting daily transaction limits to prevent significant financial losses, gives paper receipts with relevant transactional information to the customer, displaying terms and conditions clearly before a transaction, including any fees charged and the exchange rate. Also requiring virtual currency kiosk operators to refund fraudulent transactions. SB 98 does not prevent the operation of a virtual currency kiosk in South Dakota, but it limits the number of virtual currency kiosks, nor does it limit the number of virtual currency kiosks an operator can have in South Dakota, or prevent a South Dakotan from engaging in lawful, legitimate transactions using a virtual currency kiosk. Briefly, here is a summary of what each section of the bill accomplishes. Section 1 defines terms. Sections 2, 3, and 4 addresses licensing and reporting for a virtual currency operator. Section 5 requires a receipt for each transaction. Section 6 provides disclosure guidelines. Section 7 requires a refund to victims of virtual currency kiosk fraud. Section 8 establishes daily transaction limits. Section 9 creates a cap on transaction fees. Section 10 requires a toll-free customer service number. Section 11 requires virtual currency operators to provide contact information to law enforcement in the event of fraud. Section 12 requires operators to maintain a written anti-fraud policy. Section 13 requires operators to use software to assist in detecting fraud. Section 14 requires user identification verification prior to accepting a transaction. And finally, Section 15 requires training to a virtual currency kiosk staff to educate them and users about fraud at a kiosk location. Thank you for your attention to the details of this somewhat lengthy bill, and I'll step aside for further proponent testimony.
Okay, thank you for that. I had spoke to Representative Wisegram earlier. 20 minutes is good, so we're at about we're 3 minutes in right now. Senator Colbeck.
Thank you. Steve Kovac, Senator District 2, Brandon, South Dakota. Madam Chair, may I have a page distribute this letter? Thank you. This is a letter from Eric McDonald. He's actually a local CEO of Coin Lion in South Dakota. I would pay particular attention to the third paragraph and then the third from the last paragraph. I think those are very pointed. And he is a local, as I said, person here in South Dakota. I just wanted to give you a timeline of how we started. We started working with AARP this summer, came up with some legislation. That's when I first learned about cryptocurrency and crypto ATMs. February 3rd, when we were at Senate Bill 98, had a hearing in Senate Energy and Commerce. There was an unfriendly amendment that was drafted then, and then we spent a considerable amount of time talking to the opposition that night. We decided to make some changes. We thought that one of the changes that we made allowed the crypto ATM to stay in business, and the other two were about consumer affairs, so we did not make those changes. After that, we spoke to the two opponents of the bill, told them where we stood, and then we moved on. We went in and Senate Commerce and Energy on the 10th of February and got that passed out 7-0. After that, on February 17th, we actually were on the Senate floor, and then another unfriendly amendment came from a senator, and then we addressed those concerns, again saying that if someone wanted to do business in the state, we would let them have their fees, but we thought that Section 7 and Section 8 were about the consumer. And consumer protections are about consumers and not businesses. So that's why we moved on with that. Got it out of the Senate 30-3. Now, again, we have another amendment that's out there, February 25th, that we would consider to be unfriendly. So we just want you to know that we have already tried to work with the opposition a couple different times, and here we are 1 month later, still talking about the same amendment. So we would hope that we can get this bill out cleanly, and then we have a list of people behind me, so we hope that we will support Senate Bill 98.
Okay, further proponents.
Thank you,
Good
Madam
morning.
Chair. What's that? Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Matt Roby, District 5 representative, live in Watertown. I was asked to come up and, as I did in the Senate, just put a little kind of face to this issue and kind of what can happen in terms of the fraud that's occurring with these machines. No doubt there's likely some legitimate uses of them, but this last summer, my mom came into my office. So in the Senate, by the way, I told my mom I would try to not say my mom. I told her I would use the word vulnerable adult. But about halfway through my testimony, I said mom. So I'm just going to drop the charade. So anyway, it was my mom, and she came into my office, and she was frantic, and she had said somebody on the line. And it said unknown caller, and that was my first clue. This is probably an issue. And she kept saying, "I need to find a digital wallet. I need to find a digital wallet." And she was just beside herself because she thought somebody was in all of her bank accounts and all of her computer accounts, etc. And so I go out to the car with her, and I'm on the phone with this guy, and I quickly hang up on him, and he calls back several times because he's been talking to her for about an hour. And lo and behold, she had thankfully stopped at my office before she had gone to one of these kiosks. She'd already gone to the bank. She had $10,000 in cash sitting on her passenger seat, and she had an address for a gas station in town that had one of these virtual currency kiosks. And thankfully, she stopped at my office, or she would have stuck that money right into the machine, and it would have been gone forever. So I'm just here to share, just to add a little color to kind of how these scams look. And again, just looking for some reasonable regulation of these things, similar to the way we regulate ATMs. So thank you.
Thank you for that testimony. Any other proponents?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to come speak with you. My name is Jeremy Wellnitz. I'm the police chief for the city of Clark. I'm joined by law enforcement from other agencies across South Dakota who have investigated cryptocurrency kiosk frauds and scams firsthand. Cryptocurrency kiosks are not inherently criminal, but for scammers, they become one of the most powerful tools to steal money quickly, anonymously, and sometimes irreversible. That is why we are here. Just to give you a brief outlook, in 2024, the FBI had nearly 11,000 complaints related to cryptocurrency kiosks. $246.7 million was reported in losses in 2024. 2025, losses climbed to $333 million, a nearly 35% increase in 1 year. 72% of those reported victims are over the age of 60. 85% of those dollars lost suffered by older Americans, but again, this does not discriminate, this crime. Young adults are targeted via social media, dating apps, fake jobs, and investment scams are what we're all investigating. There's a lot of underreporting going on with the cryptocurrency kiosks in that because of the fear, the shame, the embarrassment, and sometimes not realizing a crime is being occurred at that time. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what is happening in South Dakota. This is not a distant problem, a big city issue. In South Dakota, over $500,000 of loss in 2025 just in cryptocurrency kiosks. Working with the cryptocurrency work group and consumer protection, this number is on the low end and what is lost due to the cryptocurrency kiosk frauds that we are seeing. Law enforcement from around the state couldn't be here today, so I just wanted to put some numbers to what they are seeing in their areas. In Brown County, they had a loss of $56,200. Yankton PD had $88,200. Moody County had $15,000. Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office had $118,000. Meade County, $44,000. And they attempted another $59,000. Madison PD had a $50,000 loss. One that's close to Pierre, Sully County, a victim had to drive to Pierre, South Dakota, withdrew $44,000 from her bank. While the scammer is on the phone with her, they made that victim drive to Aberdeen, South Dakota, where one of these kiosks were at. Thankfully, that kiosk only allowed $15,000 to be put into this kiosk. A simple Google search in South Dakota, down in Sioux Falls, they had a news story on where an elderly female lost $250,000 in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, by putting this money into a cryptocurrency kiosk. In one instance, there was a banker that stopped a victim in Sioux Falls. She took $25,000 out. Thankfully, they only got $11,000 of those funds. For me at home, I worked with a victim. She fell prey to a romance scam. The scammer built trust over time. Before requesting any money, this victim deposited over $50,000 into cryptocurrency kiosks directly from their checking accounts. And then this victim is not well off, was overdrawing her account numerous times and all of that. Eventually, the scammer ended up using this victim to launder money from other people, other victims throughout the United States. And my victim turned money launderer went to the cryptocurrency kiosks and put that into these machines. Just so you are aware, I'm not opposed to crypto. I own my own crypto. I understand it, so I'm not opposed to it. It's a consumer protection bill to protect the people in South Dakota. 17 states have similar laws of what we are proposing today that have passed, and there are currently throughout the United States, there's cryptocurrency kiosk laws that they're trying to pass in their states. So, in closing, victims described today, they didn't walk into the kiosk knowing that they were being robbed. They were exploited, financially drained, left with overdrawn accounts, broken sense of trust, and countless more never reported. They are too ashamed to come forward. This is not just an elderly problem. Young adults are targeted through social media, fake jobs, online relationships. It touches every generation, every zip code, and every income level in South Dakota. Today, I urge this committee to support this cryptocurrency kiosk law, regulation, and technology. It's not the enemy, it's just accountability. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that testimony. Further proponent testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Committee. My name is Lieutenant Casey Tegedoff with the Mitchell Police Department. Just to kind of expand on what Chief Wellnut said, just talk about a few of the victims we've had. It is not just the elderly. Just recently, we had a mid-20s-year-old school teacher who lost $12,000. Now, I can't imagine being at my age 20, I did not have that kind of money laying around. So people are losing their life savings or what they have. But we've also had, people in their mid 40s, 50s lose $5,000 at a crack. And one gentleman was going back for $5,000 more when the scammers told him this wasn't enough to take care of your warrant, I think was the scam going around then. So just to reiterate, we're just looking to protect the people that we serve, and I think it's a good bill. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have about 5 minutes left, so further proponent testimony.
Morning, Madam Chair and Committee. My name is Jeremy Bierke. I'm the Detective Sergeant with the Watertown Police Department. I was asked by Chief Wellness to come and speak with you today about these crypto kiosk scams we're seeing in Watertown. From 2023 through 2025, the Watertown Police Department has investigated 11 of these scams, totaling $158,485. I'll stress that these are reported scams and that the true number is much higher than that. A couple highlights from the cases that we had worked this year. May 2025, we had a 72-year-old female who could be a friend, a mother, a wife, a grandma. Go to the one cryptocurrency ATM to set up the account while the scammer's on the phone with her. She had left that business, went to a different crypto kiosk at a different business, at which point the 72-year-old female had started putting money into the crypto kiosk. The employee of the business had called law enforcement, and while law enforcement arrived, the victim was still on the phone with the scammer inserting $100 bills into that machine. Her total loss that day was $5,100. She had $20,000 she was planning on putting into that crypto kiosk. One more we had in November 2025, and this is a perfect example of a late report. We had a 68-year-old female lose $20,000 to a crypto kiosk. This crime occurred in October 2025. It wasn't reported for over a month in November of 2025. These are just a couple examples that we have, and unfortunately this crime's ongoing, and unfortunately we don't typically know about these until it's too late. Thank you.
All right, further proponents.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Brett Afta with the Department of Regulation, Division of Banking. I'll be very brief because time is short, but I think a couple of key takeaways here is we really need to flip the incentive structure here with these kiosks. Right now, these kiosk providers profit from every dollar that comes in, whether it's a legitimate transaction or not. and we need to incentivize them to prevent these frauds from occurring. And one of the key provisions in here is the refund structure, and that's something that would be gutted by the amendment that's floating around out there. The other thing to keep in mind, these folks have no people on the ground in South Dakota attempting to prevent these frauds. We can go into more detail what these clerks are seeing in these stores, but the providers themselves have no people here to see that person come up to the kiosk with the phone slapped against the side of their head and a purse full of cash or an envelope full of cash. There's more they could do. This bill will incentivize them to do more. Please support Senate Bill 98. Thank you.
All right, further proponents.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Grant Flynn from the South Dakota Attorney General's Office. We too support Senate Bill 98. This bill takes important steps to protect consumers from those unscrupulous actors who seek to try to steal their money, and requires that that this industry do what they can to help prevent that from happening. Like the previous speakers, the Attorney General's Office is not opposed to economic development. We're certainly not opposed to crypto, but we do want to do everything that we can to protect people and their hard-earned money from folks who are trying to remove it from them. So we supported this bill on the other side. We continue to support it in its current form. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Further proponents.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Eric Erickson with the State's Attorneys Association. For the sake of brevity, we agree with what Mr. Grant said from the Attorney General's Office and would ask for your favorable consideration.
Well, we are almost out of time, but come on up and give a brief me too.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'll keep it very brief. My name is Erica Colm. I previously served as the Director of Digital Forensic Services at Dakota State University. And in that role, I handled multiple cases of cryptocurrency fraud, including those mentioned by Chief Wellnitz. There's more than 100 of these cryptocurrency ATMs in our state, and you've likely walked right past one and not recognized it. They resemble traditional ATMs. The information required to make a purchase at these kiosks is nothing more than a phone number for some transactions. Many allow high transaction limits and charge prices significantly above the market value of cryptocurrency, even while they advertise low fees. And I just want to highlight one case that I worked while I was lab director. It was a South Dakota resident in his early 40s, and he believed he'd found a girlfriend online, and he became very deeply involved in this relationship and very deeply invested. She was selling products online, but she didn't have a checking account, so she needed his help cashing those payments. And he didn't know how to use a crypto kiosk, so she very patiently helped him with that. And while she was walking him through that process, the deposits were very small, and this happened over several months. And while they were small deposits, those added up significantly over time. And what he found out later, those were tied to fraudulent activity. There were no products to sell, and what happened was when a shotgun was sold that was never delivered, he ended up getting arrested for the non-deliverance of that product, and he was found on video cashing that check. He ended up being an unwitting money mule and was manipulated through that relationship, and those were funneled through kiosks that were operating by the companies opposing this legislation. So I would encourage you to support this legislation. I think it takes meaningful steps to help curb this fraudulent activity. I thank you for your time.
Right, thank you for that. Brief testimony.
Yes, good morning, Madam Chair. I will be brief and ask for a number of Me Too's to follow me here. My name is Eric Nelson with AARP South Dakota. We rise before you today, ask you to support Senate Bill 98. When you take this bill, I would ask you to think of the 100 members that we had here in the Capitol earlier this session and look out for them. I would tell you that this was South Dakota groups putting together a South Dakota bill for South Dakotans, and we would ask you to consider the best interest of your constituents and support Senate Bill 98. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. Any other brief Me Too's?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Ryan Wells. I work for Black Hills Federal Credit Union, but I'm actually here on behalf of my own volition. And I want to say that in my professional experience seeing these scams take place, they happen often enough and they're bad enough that we have a colloquial name for them, and we call it pig butchering. That is, these cryptocurrency scams take a period of time where the pig is fattened and then the pig is slaughtered. And what you're hearing are all of these pig butchering stories. What I want you to know is that this isn't isolated events or anecdotes. This happens all the time. Support Senate Bill 98. Thank you.
Okay.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, good morning. Carl Adams, South Dakota Bankers Association. Me too, so please support Senate Bill 98. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Dean Krogman, I represent the independent community bankers, and we are Me Too as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Jenna Severin on behalf of the South Dakota Police Chiefs Association. We are also a Me Too. I do just want to thank our officers, though, for being here today. When they show up and when they step away from their post to be here in person, to testify on a topic, you know it's important. So we would ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman, committee members. Stacey Ackerman, Executive Director for the South Dakota Sheriff's Association. Chief Wellnitz put it really excellent, and we ask for your support on 98. Thank you.
All right. Any other further proponent testimony in the room? Very quick. You want to give a Me Too? Seeing none, we have a couple remote testifiers online for the bill. Kenley Lamberty, can you hear me?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Kevin Lamberty, lobbyist with the Dakota Credit Union Association, and I just want to give a quick Me Too for all the reasons that were stated. Thank you.
All right, thank you for that. And one more, Jesse Schmidt. Jesse?
Yes, good morning. My name's Jesse Schmidt. I'm Vice President of the Better Business Bureau here in South Dakota. Monthly, we have consumers walk into our office and share their tragic stories, just as you have heard here. So the BBB is a definite Me Too on this bill as well. Thank you.
Okay, I believe that's all I had signed up online for proponent. We're going to move now to opponent testimony. Do we have any opponent testimony in the room? I don't think we had any. Yes? Is there's one more online for proponent? Oh, opponent, yes. Okay. So if there's no opponents in the room, we will move to opponent testimony online. I think we had Clara Wolfson. Clara, are you online? All right, the floor is yours. Go ahead. Oh,
Thank you, Madam Chair. Clara Wolfson with CoinFlip, joining you from Des Moines, Iowa this morning. Apologies, I was not able to make it in person, but my travel schedule would not allow. CoinFlip is a cryptocurrency kiosk company that is headquartered out of Chicago. We operate in 49 states, except for New York, and 7 countries. So we've had some experience operating these kiosks, and in the 10 years that we've been doing business, we've learned a lot of lessons that other operators, including ourselves, should adopt in order to protect consumers. And that's why we actually support 95% of what is in this bill, and I want to make that clear. We are in support of the majority of it. In fact, we wrote the majority of it. It's a model consumer protection bill that we've been working on passing in most other states now at this point for the last few years. But I want to make sure I kind of cover how we're regulated and who CoinFlip is and how we do business, and also some areas of improvement that we think we could come to an agreement on. So CoinFlip is a money service business registered with FinCEN, so we are regulated at the federal level. We file a lot of the same reports that banks and credit unions do. We file suspicious activity reports. We comply with the Bank Secrecy Act, with the U.S. Patriot Act, so we also perform OFAC checks and things like that. But we also have a money transmitter license in the state of South Dakota. One of the important provisions of this bill would require every operator that's in South Dakota to follow that same structure. We want people to be regulated. We're pro-regulation, and we think other operators should be doing the same thing. A little bit about our tools. I want to make sure I touch on some of the things that I said that we've learned while doing business for the last 10 years. So we have kind of what is considered the gold standard in the industry for consumer warnings. Before you're ever allowed to proceed with a transaction at one of our machines, we have what's called the Safe and Six, which addresses the top 6 scams. I heard a lot of testimony before this that references, you know, tragic situations like romance scams, warrant scams, jury scams. So the first thing you will see when you come to our machine is a nice graphic that doesn't read like a contract that says, hey, are you being sent here to pay a warrant or a jury fine or fee? Did law enforcement or a government personnel send you here? If so, stop, don't proceed with the transaction, call our customer support. And one of the things that we're proud of is we have 24/7 live customer support that's based here in the US, which is one of the reasons people use our products, is because unlike traditional online exchanges, we do actually offer that service. We also do something called blockchain analytics already preemptively, which is required in the bill, but we're in support of that as well. And that just requires that operators on the back end actually try and track where these transactions go later on down in the public blockchain. We use a lot of the same software that traditional financial products do to catch things like money launderers and things like that, as well as have our own enhanced due diligence policies. We have blacklists internally that we also share with the government from time to time about scams or wallets that we have found to be compromised. We practice holds ourselves. So we practice interstate holds. So if you open an account in South Dakota and then try and use it in another state, we would place an internal hold on that before it can be manually verified before the money is ever sent anywhere. On top of that, we also do a practice called wallet pinning, which means one person, one wallet. One of the misconceptions around specifically CoinFlips machines is that you are allowed to send money to someone other than yourself. That is absolutely not true. Our terms of service are incredibly clear. You can only send money to your own wallet. So when you walk up to a CoinFlip machine and you want to purchase cryptocurrency, you agree that you are sending it to yourself, but then on the back end, we will link that wallet address to you as an individual, and then we will not allow anyone else to send money to that wallet. So that's that one person, one wallet policy. We have many other warning screens that you must agree to and read before you're allowed to proceed with the transaction. In fact, there's a little timer on the screen that will literally count down, and it will not allow you to just click through the screens in rapid succession to try and get consumers to stop and read these warnings. Despite everything I just mentioned above, it is the absolute unfortunate circumstance that some illicit activity still does take place on these machines, which is why we are in support of common sense consumer protections. And I say common sense because there's a few portions of this bill that we would like to see tweaked a little bit. One of them is the daily limits provision. So the bill has that $1,000 daily limit for all users. We are supportive of a lower daily limit for new users specifically, because that's really the risk that we see, the statistical risk. First-time users of our machines are more likely to be the victim of one of those unfortunate incidents, which is why we support lower daily limits for new users. Now, the other side of that coin, of course, is an existing user. And existing users are our best customers. About 80% of our transactions every month, in terms of transaction volume, are returning customers. So we classify that customer class as safer because we've transacted with them before, we've identified them, we know who they are. And we believe that because of those safeguards, they should have higher limits. So that $1,000 a day, not necessarily reflective of the risk that we think is associated with existing customers specifically. Another thing I would like to point out is this bill explicitly loops in our online products. So CoinFlip, really our bread and butter is the cryptocurrency kiosks portion. But we do have an over-the-counter desk. It's our online desk. That's the over-the-counter is what we call it. And a lot of our customers actually start as a kiosk customer, but then transition into an online user. So, you know, a lot of people just prefer to have a physical interface. And if you are crypto curious, as we like to call it, these machines are an easy way to interface with an otherwise exclusively digital space. So you can come to one of our machines, you know, let's say you're crypto curious and you wanted to purchase some Bitcoin, we'll help you with that purchase. And then often those people that are satisfied with that will actually transition to using our online products. And this bill specifically applies the limits for the daily limits and I guess everything else in the bill. Those restrictions are also applied to our online products, and we don't believe that that is an appropriate balance of the equities because there's, to contextualize some of the fraud that we mentioned, $246 million in cryptocurrency kiosk fraud. Overall, in that same year, there was $9.3 billion of cryptocurrency fraud. This bill does nothing to address the lion's share, it's 2.6%, I believe, is cryptocurrency kiosks of the overall pie. This bill does nothing to address the lion's share of that fraud, but specifically loops in our other online products for our established customers that, once again, just lower risk and some of our best customers. So we want to try and protect those that we do business with. I forgot to mention in the beginning, we have 15 locations in South Dakota and about 2,000 customers. And we want to continue to do business with especially our returning customers in South Dakota. So that's why we would like to see some adjustments to specifically that daily limits portion. I'm glad that there was testimony that talked about the 17 other states. I would like to point out that if this bill passed as is with the $1,000 daily limit for all customers, it would make South Dakota actually one of the lowest states in terms of transaction limits. There's only 3 other states that have those limits, and that is Maine, California, and Iowa. Most of the other states have that bifurcated approach to the daily limits that I talked about. And usually it's somewhere around the neighborhood of $1,000 to $3,000 for new users, and then on the higher end for those existing users. Ohio is a good bill that has the support of AARP in that state. We've worked very well with law enforcement and regulators there to kind of come to an agreement on that. So if I had to point to a state, I would point you in that direction in terms of bills that we're currently working on. But thank you. I know I threw a lot at you. I also want to make sure I reserve time for anyone else or any questions.
All right. Thank you for that testimony. I did have one other that was signed up online as opponent, Michael Geiselhart. Michael, are you online? Oh.
Chairwoman Drew Duncan, I represent Bitcoin Depot. He couldn't get in.
Okay, great. Go ahead.
I'll just Drew Duncan, Bitcoin Depot. I'm the registered lobbyist here in the state and a lawyer from Sioux Falls. The page is passing out a regulatory press release that the company that I represent recently put out. I'll just provide a little bit of context here, and I'm not going to try and plow any of the ground that was already provided. We have worked for the last month or so with the proponents of this bill to try and come to some resolution on it. Again, Ohio is a good example of what happens when the industry comes together with law enforcement and AARP, who has been introducing this bill throughout the country. Thank you. To work on this issue throughout. And that bill, I think, currently makes some differentiation between new and existing customers, which we think in the industry provides a significant amount of both common sense regulation and new cutting edge tools that allow for the safest process for both new and existing customers. We'd ask you to take a look at the amendment and at least consider it as this bill moves to the floor. And should you have any questions, Michael can try and log back in and get let in if there's questions of the committee, or I can do my best to answer them as well. Again, my client also is in favor of 90 to 95% of this bill, just wants to see the most up-to-date tools and consumer protections and language put up the bill that it's been passing in other states as well, so that there's not a patchwork of regulation throughout the United States that really doesn't, in our opinion, help customers as much as the other language does and doesn't differentiate between new and existing. So with that, I will conclude, and if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Any other opponents in the room? Don't think anybody else was signed up. So with that, we'll move to rebuttal.
Chair, Brett Aftal will do the rebuttal. Thank you.
Hello again, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Brett Aftal, Division of Banking. Try to be succinct here, but I want to address a few things that have been brought up. There's some mention of being proactive in bringing legislation and some other state actions. So there's a few ongoing suits. Iowa Attorney General, Massachusetts Attorney General suing these specific companies. The state of Missouri Attorney General has opened an investigation into 5. And then one of the companies that testified today is settled with the Attorney General in Maine for $1.9 million. We do license these companies. We license 10 of these operators, 5 of which have kiosks in our state. There's 172 of these kiosks that are reported to us currently. Again, I touched on the incentive structure previously, but these kiosks are charging 15 to 55% in fees and markup on these transactions, and have 0 FTE in the state to detect and prevent these fraudulent transactions from happening. There's some mention of suspicious activity reports. That is an obligation on these companies, and you've heard quite a bit of testimony about the breadth of this issue. And in the last 2 years since these companies have been licensed with us, they've filed 7 SARs. 7. So they've filed more currency transaction reports. So those are transactions involving $10,000 or more in cash. So these 5 companies have filed 158 of those, but only 7 SARs. And again, these reports are filed weeks or months after the fact. So while it might provide additional information to law enforcement, as was discussed previously by other proponents, it doesn't help in any way to get that money back because it's gone. We must prevent these fraudulent transactions from happening in the first place. I think one question I ask myself as I sit in the room, where are the South Dakota consumers that want to pay these folks 20 to 30 to 40% of their money to invest more than $1,000 a day? I haven't come across any. I've been working on this bill for quite a while. One of the proponents that didn't testify today, in due diligence working on this bill, went to one of these kiosks and attempted to put money and buy Bitcoin and put it into a wallet. She didn't have a wallet established previously, so she wasn't able to transact. But it's interesting, the clerks in the store stopped her more than once and said, "You're not going to put money in that thing, are you?" Think about that for a second. What are those clerks' experience with these kiosks? You're not going to put money in that thing, are you? And I think there's been a lot of talk about disclosures. They're required in the bill, but if disclosures work to prevent these crimes, we would not be in this room right now talking about this legislation. I want to just address one thing on the amendment, because it would make this distinction between new and existing customers simply by the passage of time. No additional due diligence required to verify that that wallet is actually that consumer's. There was some mention of pinning that wallet to that individual, but I talked to the company representative. If I come into that kiosk and I have somebody talking in my ear and they send me a QR code for a wallet and I put that into the machine, that wallet is now pinned to me. And in the fraudulent transaction, it's not actually my wallet, but I would then be considered, after the passage of time, an existing customer and could put $10,500 per day into the wallet of the scammer. So before this bill was first heard in the legislature, we did an investigation of the 5 companies that have kiosks in South Dakota, 4 of which have volume. I'll just give you a couple examples of what would be considered an existing customer if that amendment is adopted. So first company, 74-year-old, 34 transaction over weeks, $246,510 deposited, $54,733 in fees. Next company, 72-year-old put in $93,000 in 14 transaction over weeks, $13,000 in fees paid to the kiosk. I mean, I could go through dozens and dozens of these. I'm just giving you a couple examples of what would be an existing customer under the amendment. And with that, I would urge you to vote yes on Senate Bill 98 and resist the amendment. Thank you.
All right, any questions from the committee? Representative Shorma.
Thank you. For Clara Wallen from CoinFlip, is she still on? There you are.
There she is.
You referenced that you have pop-up screens during the transaction process. Do you have any information on how many transactions stopped midstream through the process after they read a screen?
Certainly, we do have data on that. Like I said, we operate in 49 states and 7 countries, so it's all over the place. But there are some transactions that after speaking with a customer representative, there's some red flags that are seen and those transactions are not allowed to be processed. I don't have any South Dakota specific data that I'm prepared to share with the committee, but if you want to provide me with any specific questions, I'm happy to follow up with you.
Any other questions? Representative Schwanz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the Prime, please.
Mike Weisgram, District 24.
Thank you. My question is, how many machines do we currently have in South Dakota? And out of all those machines that we currently have in South Dakota, how do they determine what percentage is the vendor's profit margin?
Madam Chair, I think there would be better people to answer that question than myself.
Madam Chair, Brett Aftel with the Division of Banking. Thank you for the question. So currently reported to us 172 kiosks in South Dakota. And the way the information was provided to us was customer name, age, total amount put in over in the range of time. And then the fee is actually 2 parts, and the way it's defined in the bill is really important too. There's a fee, which is typically a nominal amount, $5, $10, whatever, but also the kiosk operator charges markup on the Bitcoin. Say if Bitcoin's at $80,000 today and I want to buy Bitcoin, they mark that up certain amount. So that fee calculation includes both of those. The nominal fee plus the markup gets you to that. The typical range is 15 to 30%. That higher end was actually on the smaller dollar amount transactions, but It's the combination of the two, the nominal fee plus the markup.
Any other questions from the committee? Representative Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For Ms. Wolfson online, I know there's some lawsuits out there, and specifically in Iowa. Could you speak to what's getting worked on a little bit? Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. Unfortunately, no love from my hometown state. As was referenced, the Iowa Attorney General is suing CoinFlip and Bitcoin Depot. I will note there's 14 operators in Iowa, and the Attorney General only sued the two largest operators. In that lawsuit, there was allegations that our illicit activity rate is astronomically higher than we believe it is. And I would like to be very intentional about using the word allegation because this lawsuit is ongoing. We have not had a chance to adjudicate it in court yet, and we absolutely disagree with the assertions made in the lawsuit by the Iowa Attorney General. That's the only AG that has sued CoinFlip. So that's the only one that I can speak to. But specifically on the illicit activity rates, our blockchain analytics provider is called Elliptic. It is the same service that provides a lot of law enforcement with their blockchain analytics tools. And our blockchain analytics provider puts our illicit activity rate somewhere in the neighborhood of 1%, which is absolutely online, or I should say in line, with other traditional financial institutions and products. In fact, in some cases, it's even lower. And I will also note that there's other blockchain analytics studies that are publicly available. And those companies took data from all kiosk companies, all of the publicly available data that is on the blockchain. You know, one of the cool parts about this technology is that all of these transactions are publicly accessible on the blockchain. So you can see who is doing what and where and when. And they analyze data for the whole industry, and they put the illicit activity rate for the whole industry around somewhere of the neighborhood of 1.2 to 1.5% total, which is obviously a huge disparity, and why we're looking forward to seeing our day in court so we can finally try and settle, you know, where we really believe the illicit activity rates for these machines are. Thank you for the question.
All right. Could you restate your name just for the record again?
Lara Wolfson.
All right. Thank you. And I have a question for Mr. Afdal. So I don't know if you have this information or not, but do we know the percentage of transactions that would be above that $1,000 limit in South Dakota, like in a year's time?
Madam Chair, Brett Afdal, Division of Banking. I do not have that number off the top of my head. I do not.
Okay.
We could, I mean, we have what we did was pull data for a 12-month period. There's definitely transaction volume under that $1,000 threshold. But then, you know, you quickly get up to the top and where you get to the real dollars.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Greenfield.
Okay, I've got a couple questions. First of all, for the Police Chief Wellnitz from Clark.
Madam Chair, Jeremy Wellnitz, Police Chief Clark.
Jeremy, could you tell us how these scammers find their victims in the first place?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different aspects, from pop-up scams on your computer to text messages saying that you're going to jail because you have a warrant. The romance, pig butchering scams, and there's a multitude of different things that that these scammers are using. And what I've seen is that, you know, these scammers will use one tactic and then they'll move on to the next, and then it'll just come back around to the romance scams or whatever.
Follow up. So am I safe to assume then that a lot of this is gotten through social media?
Madam Chair, I would say social media, computer pop-up scams or
Yeah.
computer pop-ups and text messages.
Okay.
Also phone calls.
Okay. Thank you, John.
Any other questions?
I do have
Okay.
another one, unless somebody else
Go ahead.
does. Is Mr. Duncan still here? Oh, yes, I have a question for you, Mr. Duncan. Madam Chair.
I didn't mean to hide from you, Representative Greenfield. Drew Duncan,
Come out,
attorney
you
from Sioux Falls,
coward.
Bitcoin.
You gave us this,
Yes.
Bitcoin Depot, and I didn't have, I'm not a speed reader, so I didn't have time to look through it all. But it's a new compliance policy, but then if you look at the very end of the compliance policy, it says, "We caution readers not to place undue reliance on forward-looking statements." In other words, everything that we've made as a compliance, that's only good today. You know, any forward-looking thing, why do they do that? Just to cover their backside? To me, it's not much of a compliance policy.
Madam Chairman, or Madam Chairwoman, Drew Duncan, Bitcoin Depot. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It certainly seems as though they're disclaiming some of the interests that they have with relation to the warranty or whatever that they're putting on there. What I would suggest to you is, I think that's probably fairly common in the world of business that you put a similar type disclaimer. That doesn't change the fact that the policy is put in effect. That is what they're doing in practice. And really forward-looking statements is a generally vague term, is what I would tell you. The meat and potatoes of this, Representative Greenfield, is and I think what everybody is now talking about are two or three things. The disclosures that are being put on, which everybody agrees to. Everybody thinks the disclosures that are getting put on the screens that are being implemented into law, I don't hear anyone suggesting that those aren't a good idea. And, as the industry evolves, so does the disclaimers that get put on the screen. And so do the schemes that we all catch. Second issue that I'll tell you with regards to this policy is generally, limits, refunds, fees, which is kind of what, is what we're talking about here. Those things and those policies that the industry are putting in effect in other states and have asked for here are kind of the forward-looking statement. It's like the most up-to-date disclosure, disclaimers, policies that are being used in the market in order to protect consumers. The difference between new and used consumers is a big one. For new consumers, you'll see in the amendment you have this 72-hour hold. That catches a lot of these new users, people that I should say that is the newest form here to catch a lot of these schemes before they start. And let us not forget, and if we're talking about forward-looking statements, all the other parties that are involved in these schemes. You start by someone contacts you on your phone or social media or however they contact you. I like to call them crank calls, but however they get in touch with you. And then these people go to the bank or they go to an ATM or they go somewhere and they withdraw money, which is maybe like the second level of defense. And then they go to the Bitcoin kiosk where there's the disclaimers. That's maybe the third line of defense, right? And then the fourth line of defense would be the new and existing that would have the hold. That's what we're asking for. Those would be the kind of the forward-looking statements. And as those change, I know this is an incredibly long answer, as those change, I just don't think that they want to restrict how that, how they're looking at these things. There's a lot of interest between a lot of people in making this business in crypto, which is exploding across the country and the world and is being more legitimized by our administration in Washington, D.C. and others. Quite frankly, it is the way of the world. You hear all this talk about blockchain and others. There is an effort throughout to legitimize this industry along with many others, right? And included in that is going to be changing technologies, changing disclaimers, changing public perception of how this works. And I think that they're just essentially saying they want the ability to continue to look forward to that technology as it exists. And again, incredibly long answer to an incredibly short question, and I apologize.
Are any further questions? Any further questions? Okay, we will move to committee discussion. Any discussion?
Madam Chair.
Representative Malali.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I see this bill provides law enforcement and consumer safeguards. However, the bill significantly expands regulatory control over the private financial technology. It does align with the Republican platform in protecting consumers and anti-fraud enforcements, but I'm having a real issue with the regulatory control and centralizing the reporting to a state agency when this is a private financial technology. So 95% of the bill I am agreeing with because it does protect consumers and it helps law enforcement. But there are some issues that I see with it. So I'm going to be a soft no on this.
All right, further discussion? Further discussion and or action?
Well, I just got a comment to piggyback off the representative over there. You know, I was a teacher, and I guess if a kid got a 95%, to me that was an A, so it must be mostly good, so I'll be supporting it.
Representative Yuri Balk.
Madam Chair, I do pass.
Okay. We have a move to pass by Representative Yuri Balk, second by Representative Baumiller. Comments on your motion?
Yeah, it seems, again, the 95% seems great. The daily limits, if that's such an issue, can come back and amend that later. I think it's worthwhile to go safer into it. And so for those reasons and all the other proponent reasons, and thank you again to the testifiers, especially our police that are here, I will be supporting this bill.
All right.
Madam Chair,
Representative Sharma.
I do have a comment. Being one of those vulnerable seniors, my wife and I have a lot of contact from these types of scammers, and we're of sound mind enough to not get sucked into it. But I can see where they're very persuasive, and sometimes I'll respond back just to see how persuasive they can be, and it's amazing. I mean, they really have a good story. So I appreciate the bill, and I appreciate the protection for people like me, and I'll be voting in favor. Thanks.
Okay, with that, we have a due pass motion with Senate Bill 98. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representatives Elward.
No.
Duffy is excused. Greenfield.
Aye.
Kaiser.
Aye.
Mullally.
No.
Knowles.
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Schwanz.
Aye.
Shorma.
Aye.
Yuri Balk.
Aye.
Weisgram.
Aye.
Baumiller.
Aye.
Lems.
Aye.
Madam Chair, we have 10 yea, 2 nay, 1 excused.
Having received a majority of the members elect, Senate Bill 98 will move to the floor.
Madam Chair,
Representative Baumiller.
personal privilege.
Yes.
On behalf of Representative Peterson, my district mate, we would like to welcome Casey Tegedoff, a constituent of ours. He serves the Mitchell Police Department, but he lives in Alexandria, so thank you for coming.
All right, with that, we will move to Senate Bill 110, regulate how broadband internet access service providers use customer data. Welcome, Senator Roll.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. District 1, State Senator Mike Roll. I am having the page pass out a map just kind of showing what other states have done in the area. But SB 10 seeks to make sure that broadband providers don't continue using, trading, and selling our constituents' information without their knowledge and consent. Now, you may be asking why broadband providers and why not Google, and not Google, and I believe that answer is very simple. Google is a website that's free to use with multiple competitors like DuckDuckGo or Yahoo, providing consumers options. They have the choice in who they use. Broadband, however, is a public utility that you pay for, and it's not optional in today's market. Most consumers often don't even have an option of providers. In fact, 48% of South Dakotans only have access to one provider. Sites like Google are the store, and broadband providers are the road needed to get there. The federal government also clearly thinks they're different, as broadband providers fall under the FCC and websites fall under the FTC. So what can they see and what can they track? Well, honestly, it depends on the website, application, or program. Many of you guys, if you look at your search bar when you're on a website, if it's HTTP, not only can they see the website you're on, but they can also see the exact information you're viewing, typing in, watching, or clicking. If it's a HTTPS, they would still have access to the sites visited, how long you were there, but would be unlikely to determine the information provided directly to the site. Now, why does that matter? Each small data point about you by itself is meaningless, but together as a large cluster of data points, they create a picture, which is what data brokers sell to advertisers, the government, credit agencies, insurance providers, or anyone else willing to pay for it. In today's tech world, everything from the Department of Health licensing to pay your state sales tax requires internet access. You no longer have the choice of filing paper forms. We require it done online. Internet is a public utility, which is why the legislature spent hundreds of millions of dollars in the last few years helping to build out the network in rural areas, something we have never done for the Googles of the world. The FCC actually rolled out these exact requirements in 2016 as a series of FCC rules. However, after extensive lobbying of Congress, it led them to nullify these rules in 2017. When the president signed into law the rollbacks, he said the federal government has no business setting up these requirements. These are state issues. And while I disagree that the federal government shouldn't be providing us these protections, when the federal government steps down, I believe states must step up. While the federal government has enacted some limited protections for data information, allowing some information to be opted out and also require companies to report to the FCC on their practices, I would argue that that's not good enough, which is why 20 states have enacted additional data protection laws, including California, Colorado, Connecticut, Delaware, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Maryland, Minnesota, Montana, Nebraska, New Hampshire, New Jersey, Oregon, Rhode Island, Tennessee, Texas, Utah, and Virginia have each further protected digital data on the state level. I would also note 15 states have pending bills. While each state has taken a different approach, each state has seen the importance of data privacy and has taken some steps that include protecting consumer data from broadband companies. So what is exactly in the bill you're about to hear a lot of opposition on? Well, Section 1 talks about the definitions. It defines customer personal information, which includes information such as your date of birth, your ethnicity, your political beliefs, your religion, your financial information, your government-issued personal numbers, health information, and information pertaining to minors and children, as well as your billing information. Section 2 requires that a broadband internet access provider cannot use, disclose, or sell personal information, except as permitted by this bill. When you go into Section 3, it allows internet providers to sell customer information if the consumer opts in, in a clear manner, and allows the customer may opt out at no cost. Section 4, exceptions for when a provider may disclose or permit information or personal information. So the first exception is for the purpose for which providing the service the customer is paying for. This means anything needed to actually operate or provide the service is allowed. Secondly, to comply with any legal process, court, or administrative order. Thirdly, for any billing or collection-related services. Fourthly, to protect the rights of the broadband provider from fraudulent use of the network. And then 5, 6, and 7 are all making sure that for any emergency situation, they can still use this information. Section 5, providers can't keep personally identifiable information for longer than it's needed for the purpose in which it was given, but may keep it if it's part of a broader aggregate of customer information that isn't personally identifiable to the actual customer. Section 6, providers can use the information for advertising their own services to the customers, but must allow individuals the opportunity to opt out of those advertisements if that's what the customer wants. Section 7 clarifies nothing in this act stops providers from collecting or selling personally identifiable information as part of a larger aggregate of information that doesn't personally identify the customer. Section 8 requires providers take reasonable steps to secure personal information, and if they do take reasonable steps to obtain or to protect personal information, they're not at fault. It allows them to do it internally or hire the process out, allowing for best practices. And then Section 9, providers must notify of their right to opt in or opt out, and they have to say what was collected, how it was used, and how long it's going to be kept. Section 10 provides providers must notify the customer if there's any material change to the use, storage of the information being collected. And then finally, Section 11 allows the customer to authorize other parties to access the information. Now, in Senate committee, I had worked with the committee members, and there was some reluctance on smaller providers. So we did offer an amendment that would have exempt smaller providers, similar to what Texas did. I put that amendment out there if that's something that this committee has a concern on as well. But I think in the way it's drafted now, it provides broad protections for everybody. This bill allows South Dakotans more transparency on how they can protect their personally identifiable digital data. It does so in a way laying the foundation for future citizen protections with digital data. South Dakota hasn't done anything to protect our citizens' private digital data, and we need to start somewhere. I would propose protecting our citizens from large utility companies and their ability to sell private information without our citizens' consent would be an appropriate place to start. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, do we have any other proponent testimony? Hello?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Samantha Chapman. I represent the ACLU of South Dakota, and we are happy to rise in support today of Senate Bill 110. Senate Bill 110 is a strong step toward protecting the data privacy rights of South Dakotans and enhances our rights under the 4th and 1st Amendments of the U.S. Constitution. Technological innovation has outpaced our privacy protections. As a result, our digital footprint can be tracked by corporations and government actors in ways that were once unthinkable. SB 110 establishes straightforward, basic requirements for the usage of your data by internet service providers. Your constituents need protection against abusive data collection practices. Internet service providers have access to data that can paint an intimate picture of an individual, including their political beliefs and healthcare needs. Advertisers and data brokers are increasingly using this data to decide what prices to advertise to someone, the content they should steer them to, and even the types of loans to offer them. This morning via email, I shared with each of you a report from the FTC titled "A Look at What ISPs Know About You." This report outlines the invasive practices of many internet service providers, amassing large pools of data on us based on our browsing history and our use of add-on services such as cable TV, email, and search. The report demonstrates that what ISPs are currently doing to track user activity across devices and collect our precise geolocation. This data can reveal our health conditions, race, religion, political beliefs, and familial relationships, and ISPs readily use that data to categorize each of us. This massive data and surveillance of our lives is the result of the current privacy policies. ISPs are already collecting and selling this data to third parties without your knowledge, much less without your permission. You pay internet service providers for a service. You should not also be their product. You should also support SB 110 if you believe in due process rights and your 4th Amendment right to privacy. Law enforcement and federal agencies often purchase data from brokers, access commercial databases, and use third-party data to bypass warrant requirements. Because commercial data can be purchased without a warrant, agencies may obtain persistent device identifiers and movement patterns tied to protests or rallies. In fact, the government used data from third parties to identify and prosecute a lot of the January 6th protesters in 2021. If the government cannot constitutionally collect certain data directly, it should not be able to buy it indirectly. This bill will provide an extra layer of protection against Fourth Amendment violations. We also view this bill as a safeguard of our First Amendment rights. Free speech requires freedom from constant monitoring. If every search, click, message, or location ping is recorded and stored indefinitely, individuals might self-censor, and political minorities could be chilled, and dissent becomes risky. SB 110 imposes few regulatory requirements on internet service providers. Its core rule is simple. Our broadband data can only be used to provide us with broadband service. The additional obligations are common sense best practices that the industry should be undertaking anyway, such as obtaining consent for additional uses, taking reasonable cybersecurity measures, and providing notice to consumers of their data practices. A free society requires space to think and speak without being recorded and profiled by large corporations and government actors. The right to privacy is not about controlling business, it's about protecting individuals from unwanted intrusion. If South Dakota is the freest state in the nation, we should have the freedom to use the internet without fear of being tracked and profiled, and the right to delete our personal information. SB 110 affirms that individuals, not corporations, own their digital lives. The federal privacy protections that are currently in place are a floor and not a ceiling. South Dakota can and should do better to protect our privacy online, and we urge you to vote yes on SB 110. Thank you.
All right, for the proponent testimony.
Good morning again, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Eric Nelson, Government Relations and Registered Lobbyist for AARP South Dakota. We are the membership organization of the 50-plus population with nearly 100,000 members from across the state advocating on issues that impact the 50-plus population. We ask you to support Senate Bill 110. Senate Bill 110 is consistent with AARP policies regarding data privacy and privacy protections. This bill is also consistent with consumer protection policies that internet service providers incorporate these protections into their services. Older adults will benefit from this bill because it furthers data privacy and protection by preventing broadband service companies from using customers' data unless they consent. A notification requirement and an opt-in mechanism that must be clear, accessible, and easy to navigate will make it easier for older adults to understand their options. And for these reasons, Madam Chair and members of the committee, we ask you to support this bill. Thank you.
All right, any other proponent testimony? All right, with that, we will move to opponent testimony.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Justin Smith. I am an attorney from Sioux Falls, registered lobbyist for the Greater Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce and for Mid-Continent Communications, both of whom rise in opposition to this bill. First, I want to start by saying South Dakota internet service providers are not misusing or selling customer private data. This bill is a solution in search of a problem that does not exist. Where are the constituents of yours who are asking you for this bill? Where are the constituents who are reporting that they are having their data misused or sold without their permission? Where are the lawsuits that are brought against these carriers, these internet service providers? This problem is not happening in South Dakota. Examples have been given from other states. That doesn't exist here. That doesn't deal with our problems here. The map that has been passed out to you is entirely misleading. Each of those states has a different law on data privacy with different scope, definitions, requirements, and burdens. Some apply to internet service providers alone. Some apply to internet service providers and social media companies and telecommunications companies. The scope of those laws is vastly different. So we'd ask you to have the proponents cite the actual laws and let us talk about the specifics of those laws and how they actually compare to this bill. If this passes, Mid-Continent Communications, CenturyLink, your small town telecom providers are going to have to comply with this law as well as laws in other states surrounding South Dakota. So it's a patchwork of obligations that we have to comply with. Each one has different requirements, different forms, different standards. That raises expense for all of our customers in having to comply with all of that red tape that differs from state to state. I'd invite you to look at the very beginning of the bill, at Section 1. That a new section be added to Chapter 4931. That chapter deals with telecommunications services. Currently, under South Dakota law, broadband internet service providers are not regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, period. This bill, for the first time in state history, would make broadband internet service providers subject to regulation under Title 49 and Chapter 4931 specifically. Where is the provision in this bill for full-time employees of the Public Utilities Commission to enforce this law? Where's the appropriation for that? Where's the rulemaking authority? Look at the end of the bill. Where's the enforcement mechanism here? There isn't one. There's no criminal penalties. There's no civil penalties. There's no AG enforcement mechanism. This bill doesn't have any way to actually enforce it. So question, what's the point of the bill at the end of the day? It just says thou shalt not, and there's no way to enforce it. I would argue there's two risks here of enforcement. One is that we're going to have a slew of lawsuits filed by customers and the ACLU against your South Dakota hometown telecom carriers or Midco or your other providers in South Dakota to enforce a law which is brand new and unclear and broad and sweeping, or the PUC is going to be asked to enforce a law which doesn't have an enforcement mechanism and which it's never been required to regulate internet service providers before today. I'd invite you also to look at Section 4 of the bill at lines 5 through 8. Though that language right there says a service provider may use, disclose, sell, or permit access to customer personal information without customer approval for the purpose of providing broadband internet access service from which the information is derived. This exception swallows the entire bill, because the providers you'll hear from today will make the argument we're not selling or misusing customer data. So we're using it for legitimate purposes and to provide these internet services, and this exception means we don't have to do any of these opt-ins or opt-outs because that exception exists in the bill. I'd point out that the arguments that were made by the ACLU in support of the bill to say that this protects January 6 protesters or protects people from law enforcement investigations is also untrue under page 3, line 2. This exception, you may do it without customer approval to comply with legal process or other laws, court orders, or administrative orders. That's the tools of the trade for law enforcement. There's a lot of other opponents, so I'm going to sit down, but I just want to tell you this is a bill that is a solution in search of a problem that doesn't exist here in South Dakota. It's trying to take California overregulation and put it into our state. Please defeat the bill. Thank you.
All right, further opponents.
Madam Chair, my name is Kara Semler. I'm the Executive Director for the South Dakota Telecommunications Association. I've asked the pages to pass out a few handouts to reference as I speak. I represent 18 community-based South Dakota-owned companies. 12 are South Dakota cooperatives. We have 3 municipal-owned. We have 2 family, small company-owned, and a tribally owned company that are members of the association. The companies I represent, the 18 companies, are highly regulated by the Federal Communications Commission and the PUC. And amongst the documents there, you should have received 2 documents that I handed out. The pages handed out for me, thank you pages, is a chart. It's a multicolored chart. It lists the various regulations that these companies must comply with. Regulation is robust. It takes 4 pages to go through this list. And in this list, you'll find CP&I regulations. We're required to train on CP&I and then report to the FCC on CP&I. And CP&I is an acronym that stands for Customer Proprietary Network Information. It's codified in Federal Law 47 U.S.C. 222. It requires these companies, the 18 companies I represent, to protect consumer information. I also asked the pages to hand out a document that was issued by the FCC. It's a small business. We are small businesses. It's a small business compliance guide. It takes 17 pages to get through a description and to outline all that these companies must do to comply with that federal code. It is robust regulation. It is not minimal. We do comply with it. Senate Bill 110, for the companies I represent, would just add another layer. It adds state regulation, it will add cost of compliance, and the law already exists. The requirements, the protection, it already exists in federal law, and we comply with it. Your rural South Dakota-owned community-based companies will incur cost and employee time to comply. We ask you to vote no.
All right, further opponents. We have about 7 minutes left. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try to be brief. Brett Kennecke, a lawyer from Custer representing CenturyLink. I have to agree with Mr. Smith and Mrs. Semler about their criticisms of the bill. 4931 is the intended chapter for this amendment to go into. That regulates wireline telecommunications services at the Public Utilities Commission. Internet service provisions are not regulated at the Public Utilities Commission because they're regulated by the FCC under federal preemption laws. So not only does this add another layer, it's an extremely confusing layer because who will enforce this and can they? I have significant doubts about whether this can be enforced by the Public Utilities Commission or anybody else because the provisions of internet service aren't regulated the same way telecom services are. And so it's a fatal flaw in the bill that I think can't be fixed. Past that, I have significant criticisms of the usage of the word use in the bill. We have to use customer information in order to provide them with service. That's the information we get from them. And it consists of their address and their billing information and those sorts of things. We have to use that in order to provide service, in order to relay information to first responders and the like. And this bill creates significant confusion in my mind as to who can receive then that information when it's necessary. I'd ask you to oppose the bill this morning, and I'll stand by for questions. Thank you.
All right, further opponents. Do we have any other opponents in the room? Yes, we do. Mr. Van Camp.
Whoa. Thank you, Madam Chair. Wrong way. Thank you. First time today. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Bill Van Camp. I'm a lawyer from Pierre and a registered lobbyist for AT&T. I won't repeat the prior opponent testimony, and I know that online we've got somebody from a trade association who's willing to speak extensively and has knowledge in this area. I'll just point out that one of the problems with the proponent's position here is they don't understand, and I think will be backed up by the further testimony, that 90 to 95% of internet traffic is encrypted. And so the idea that an ISP or a broadband provider has all of the information about what you're doing on a website, not the pipe, but on the website, is just factually not accurate. And so what they're trying to obtain here is not something that they're actually going to be able to do under this. The patchwork approach doesn't work for us. It's a win for companies that are providing website services and running big tech operations, but it shoves a burden solely on the pipe, which is us, and we don't like it for that reason. We hope you defeat the bill. Thank you.
All right, any other opponents in the room? I do believe we have one online. Okay, Jake Leastock, are you there?
Yes, Chair Lems. And members of the committee, my name is Jake Lestock. I'm here today on behalf of CTIA, the trade association representing the wireless communications industry, here in opposition to SB 110. This legislation would impose unworkable restrictions on how internet service providers manage customer information and further fragment privacy legislation, putting South Dakota at odds to every other state framework that was previously mentioned. Just want to start off by beginning that broadband is not regulated like utility because it is not a monopoly. Competition is fierce, from wireless to fiber to satellite. We're all providing broadband in South Dakota and providing more choices. SB 110 would impose unworkable and silent restrictions on ISPs, while other internet actors remain outside of the scope. The legislation wrongly assumes that ISPs somehow have access to more sensitive information than other actors within the ecosystem, while others often have the same access or even more. This would lead to large swaths of data, consumer data, unprotected, and consumers with a false sense of security. This type of legislation would leave other internet ecosystem actors out, including browsers, websites, app developers, social media, data brokers. These would be entirely uncovered despite having more visibility into user behavior. Additionally, as was just mentioned, web traffic is increasingly encrypted, up to 95%, some say. So as the sponsor was saying earlier, when we're able to see internet traffic, that's just not the case anymore. And additionally, virtual private networks are being commonly used. This would block ISP visibility to even seeing a domain name. So I would emphasize that 94% of internet users believe all companies that touch their online data should follow the same privacy rules. And it's for these reasons that we believe that if South Dakota is going to act on a privacy bill and have some privacy legislation, that they should look to all these other states that were mentioned that are comprehensive frameworks. They require opt-in consent for sensitive data and opt-out rights for high-risk use, and they're applied equally across all companies. Any legislation should be tech neutral, covering all industries, all types of data, and interoperable with all these other state frameworks to avoid further fragmentation in the national privacy landscape. So for all these reasons, we would urge you not to move SB 110, and thank you for your consideration.
All right, any other opponents? All right, seeing none, we are going to move to rebuttal.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. District 1 State Senator Mike Roll. I guess addressing a couple different things. It's kind of hard because some of the opponent testimony actually contradicted itself. But some of the info, like let the FCC do this. Well, the FCC tried to do this exact thing, and Congress was actually the ones that repealed it after extensive lobbying. 48% of South Dakotans only have one option. That is a monopoly. Over half the state has one option. They don't get to pick which broadband company they want. They can't ask that this broadband company do this or that broadband company do that. It's, do you want internet or do you not want internet? There was no claim in the original presentation that all 21 states have the identical legislation. I've said they've all taken steps. And quite frankly, most of them have taken steps beyond this, and this is encompassed in them. But this exact language has passed in both Maine and Nevada. Texas was very similar, with the exception of Texas excluded small providers, and then they also did a broader framework for actual websites. I think not doing a framework for the websites was a recognition that we have a problem. Let's solve part of this and build on it. I fully believe there should be a summer study on this, and it needs to go well beyond this. This is a foundational ground piece, but it's an important one because this is how they actually get there. This is how you get to the internet to even start. The AG, of course, would have enforcement abilities, and furthermore, he'll be able to use the FCC reports to be able to see, and that's the point. A lot of these FCC regulations are actually them reporting what they're doing, but it doesn't necessarily say that they have to do this or can't do that. They do say in the FCC that location has to be opt-in, which I'll notice, I'm guessing a lot of you guys on your phones, you've had a website ask you before, allow your location. That's because they have to with that, but they don't with your other personal information. As far as the legal process would be getting a warrant to be able to get that information, not being able to just pay to get the information. And I'd compare that maybe to telephones a little bit. Madam Chair, I could not go get your phone records. I would need your permission, or I'd have to get a warrant. I couldn't just go to the phone company and buy your phone records. That's invasive. That's your personal private information. Unfortunately, our laws haven't caught up to that with the internet yet. So I do thank you guys for the opportunity to debate SB 10. This bill doesn't conflict with FCC rules. The FCC tried to implement these, and they actually worked together. This exact law was challenged by broadband providers in other states, and the broadband providers lost in federal court that it was constitutional and it was legal. States that have done this have seen no price increase when compared to neighboring states. None. I think that's telling alone, and I think we also heard from the opponents that they already have to match a bunch of different states' stuff, which tells you that it can be done and is being done other places, and other states are protecting this information. South Dakotans have that same right. This doesn't fix everything. Very few of our bills do fix everything in one swing, but this takes real steps in providing basic protections. We spend a lot of time in this body debating what the majority of our district wants. I'll be the first to admit there's a lot of issues where our districts are divided. Some constituents support a bill, others oppose a bill. We often must search for what truly has majority, and sometimes we just have to use our best judgment. But this isn't one of those issues. I challenge each of you to think back to your last Cracker Barrel, and if you ask the room, do you think your internet provider that you pay a monthly fee to in the modern age should be able to collect and sell your personal information, your child's personal information, without your knowledge or consent? How many hands do you think would go up in that Cracker Barrel? I know what mine would look like. This isn't a divisive topic with the public. In fact, it's overwhelmingly slanted in favor of data privacy protections. It's only divisive for the companies profiting off our citizens' data without our citizens' knowledge or consent. Nothing stops providers from using this data as an aggregate or a group or for the purpose of which it was actually collected. It just says that if you're going to use, transfer, or sell a customer's personal identifiable data, you need to get that customer's permission. Much like, as I said earlier, we would need permission or a warrant to get access to phone records. It should be the same thing with digital. We need Senate Bill 110, and we need a summer study, as I said. It's a foundational piece on how to get the train on the tracks moving in the right direction, and it lets those parties in the broader data collection industry know that our legislature's serious and that they need to come work with us because we're going to start working on stuff like this and actually get protections in place for our citizens like many other states have. We do have more work to do, but this is kind of the bottom of the barrel to lay the foundation for everything building up. I'd also mention, and I do apologize to the representative from Rapid City. I didn't look at your platform, but I guess it's similar. But Section 7, subsection 6 of the South Dakota State GOP Republican platform has a section called Data Protection. We support the protection of personally identifiable information. We oppose the unethical collection of personally identifiable information. Such information should not be obtained without legal consent. That's exactly what this bill is doing. It's saying if you want to use and sell our information outside of why I gave it to you, you need to ask permission. If you're not doing it, it shouldn't be an issue.
All right, any questions from the committee? Representative Wise-Graham.
Thank you. This is for Ms. Semler, please. Thank you, Chair. The question is, does current federal law prevent the sale of this consumer information?
Madam Chair, I can only speak to the companies I represent, and they're regulated a bit differently than some of the other opponents you heard from. And for the companies I represent, it prohibits all of the things this bill is intended to prohibit, and it protects all of the things this bill is intended to protect. And included in that list of regulations I provided you all with are the various areas of regulatory compliance that the companies I represent must answer to at the FCC.
Follow up.
Go ahead.
Has your companies received consumer complaints about information that may have come from your companies that they are upset about?
Madam Chair, no. And our companies are also regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, and I see a commissioner in the room. We have to be responsive to the Consumer Complaint Department at the PUC as well. The companies I work for are all located and operate in this state, in South Dakota. And should there be complaints, the Public Utilities Commission can take those and they can haul us into hearing, and we have to answer to them.
Chair, could I ask a question to the PUC, gentlemen?
Sure.
This question would be for Chris. You look reluctant. No, you don't look reluctant. Okay. So, Has the PUC received written complaints about information from South Dakota companies giving out information, and our consumers, have they given you evidence of that?
If I might, to my knowledge, Representative, the answer would be no, but that would be subject to check because I didn't go through our consumer complaint database before hustling up here when I heard the PUC being invoked by several of the testifiers.
Thank you, Mr. Nelson. No other questions.
All right, Representative Baumiller.
For the prime. Why was Title 49 picked?
Madam Chair, that was a decision I left with the LRC, but the similarities between telecommunications and internet access, I think, are very intertwined.
Representative Schwanz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the prime. Can you answer that same question? Has there been complaints that you know of recently?
Madam Chair, I can't speak for the PUC. I can speak for a bunch of emails and constituents in my district. That's how the issue originally came up, was I had constituents reaching out asking why South Dakota wasn't protecting our citizens' data like other states were. And then as I dug into it, there's a couple different summer conferences that I sat in on because I specifically had a consumer that I wasn't overly knowledgeable. So I tried to get more information on that. And it kind of culminated into where actually one night in Minneapolis, I ran into somebody that worked for Midco, and we had dinner together randomly, and some of those conversations came up in dinner, and it really motivated me to try to pursue it, to get it, because I realized how important it really is.
Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you for that answer. With that, do you think that this law would be enforceable?
Madam Chair, I do think it would be enforceable. Any law that we put on the books has enforcement. I don't know, not so sure there's punitive damages per se, but it certainly would be enforceable because they the broadband providers would have to include that on their reports to the FCC of how they're using the information, which would give the AG access to be able to do that. So if there was complaints, they would have to be following our processes and come through. So I think it would be like any other business in South Dakota. Let's say, like if I had a liquor license that was out or not following a certain rule on something, they would reach out to me and say, you need to follow these rules if you want to keep operating your business, essentially.
All right, any other questions?
Madam Chair.
Representative Yuri Bulk.
For the STCT, yep, association leader, member. Could you just walk me through what the extra costs, the extra things would be in trying to comply to this rule that's different than what's there federally?
Madam Chair, well, the chart that I did hand out, you're going to see a logo on the bottom, Consortia Consulting. We operate in very small communities. Some of the companies I work for have less than 10 employees. We have to outsource a lot of our compliance work because we don't have the expertise on staff. We would first have to outsource to get an idea from the consultants as to what we need to build into our process. It would also depend upon, so I can't answer that with certainty, but there'd be hours of consulting work on the front end, and then we would need to train our staff to understand what the new obligations are. And I have a lot of question as to what the PUC's role is and if there's going to be reporting obligations. That's not clear from this bill. It falls into 4931, but I don't know what that means. I don't know what the PUC's role is going to be. So, for example, we have a filing, the companies I represent have an annual filing we must make with the Public Utilities Commission to demonstrate our compliance with a variety of laws and rules. Does this get added to that? I'm not quite sure. And for those of us that are regulated at the PUC, does it put an extra burden on us versus the companies that aren't regulated in the same way at the PUC? Because the PUC does have direct jurisdiction over the companies I represent because we fall into the telecommunications bucket. Although we offer telecom and broadband, we're defined as telecommunications companies. So I've not answered that well, but there will be added cost.
Follow up?
And can you, and you said, that this is at the federal level already, so therefore it's not needed. But so then can you show any difference as to, or like, are there specific examples where this is actually different than what is already required federally?
For us, I think it is a complete duplication, only it adds a state scheme, a state reporting, a state, I'm not quite sure what it requires us to do at the state level because the bill doesn't specify that. But for us, it's really duplicative, and it just adds another layer of regulation, another layer of action unnecessarily.
All right. I have a question for Commissioner Nelson. All right, since it was brought up, can you explain to us if this bill was passed, signed into law, what would be the PUC's role?
If I might, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Chris Nelson, Chairman of the Public Utilities Commission. The Commission has not taken a position on this bill, and perhaps one of the reasons is nowhere in this bill does it tell us to do anything. What did catch my attention, however, is the fact that the bill as drafted indicates that all of these sections would be put into Chapter 4931, which is the traditional telecommunications, telephone chapter. And this, obviously, content has nothing to do with traditional telephone service. So I think we're concerned about simply where this is being placed. To me, if it were to pass, it begs to be put in its own chapter because it's a completely new topic and certainly not in keeping with traditional telephone service regulation.
Okay, thank you for that. Representative Mullally, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for the prime. I do appreciate you saying that this aligns with the South Dakota GOP platform, but it also aligns with the South Dakota Constitution of Article 6, subsection 1. But my question to you is, this data that's being sold, do you have any financial figures on what actually is being sold, what the cost of that, is?
Madam Chair? No, I don't have any firm financials. I mean, it's a $1 trillion business nationwide. I don't know as far as South Dakota, but data brokers themselves are a very large money industry, essentially. But no, I don't have a number of how much per South Dakotan, like their info is being sold, if that's what you're asking, like how much it's being sold for, or maybe clarification on the question.
Clarification on the question, Madam Chair. Just the overall industry itself of data being sold. Because I met with a company the other day that, wow, the amount of data they have on each individual was beyond my comprehension. So I'm just trying to figure out, what the overall business for the entire United States would be. You said it was a multi-billion-dollar industry? A multi-trillion-dollar industry. So if they were not allowed to sell the data,
Madam Chair? Well, so, and I think this is what the opponents are probably maddest about. I'm not ending the industry. Theoretically, Google can still partake in this, and quite frankly, so can they. They just have to first tell the consumer and get their permission to be able to do it. So I think part of the consternation is they're saying, well, a lot of these other states also put restrictions on Google and a lot of these other sites as well, and this isn't doing that because I'm focusing solely on the broadband provider, because I'm saying South Dakotans don't have options. 50% of them have to go with a specific broadband provider. And then furthermore, some of these other scenarios, again, just using Google, I can go to DuckDuckGo. I can go to Yahoo. I can go to other options if I don't like the policies of a certain website. Again, you don't have that option with broadband providers. And those websites are obviously seeing stuff that you do through their website. But broadband providers, it's the road to it. It's literally all of everything you're doing on that particular site.
Thank you for that answer. It clarifies a little thing. Who is the basic one provider that South Dakotans have to choose from? The broadband.
Madam Chair, I believe Midco is probably the largest in the state. CenturyLink is probably pretty close as well.
Any other questions? Representative Weisgram.
Prime, please. Senator, how does this legislation affect Starlink? You mentioned we didn't have a choice, but we really do.
Madam Chair, I'm not 100% sure on the definition of Starlink, if they're considered broadband or how it's done specifically with that one company. So I can't give an educated answer.
Further questions? Any other questions? All right, we will go to committee discussion. Any discussion? Discussion? Representative Shorma.
I agree with the prime sponsor's comment that this looks like it needs a summer study. It's a complicated, very mixed up kind of group of ideas that need to be filtered so that we make sure that we're protecting without harming. So I'm apprehensive of supporting the bill with the idea that a summer study is really what's needed.
Representative Baumiller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I appreciate the prime sponsor. One of my biggest hang-ups is the title and the chapter. I think a better home would be Chapter 37, Deceptive Trade Practices, so I'm going to be resisting the bill today, but thank you.
Any other discussion? All right, discussion. Representative Yuri Bulk.
Can I make a motion?
Yes, you may make a motion.
I'm going to make a motion for do pass.
Do pass? Okay, we have a motion do pass by Representative Yuri Bulk. Do we have a second? Any second on that motion? Representative Greenfield, we have a second. Okay, discussion on your motion.
I am concerned for the small businesses, and I do wish a little bit that amendment was there. But I do feel, since it's duplicative of what the federal regulations are, I think, then it seems like they can be able to fall in line with this, okay? I think broadband internet providers, it needs to be utility at this point. We are at a point where you can't do anything without these services, and so it should be controlled as one. Just like a water utility doesn't monitor where you're using your water, whether it's for the bathroom or the shower or something else like that. I think this is a good, and I don't think it does enough. I think it could go even farther, and so I hope that we continue this conversation and bring more data privacy protections and continue to go after the others that say it's an issue. So for that, I'll be supporting the bill.
Representative Peterson.
Thank you. I'm just going to make a few comments on the motion. I'm not going to offer a substitute, but I will be resisting this motion. I appreciate the efforts of the prime sponsors, both of them. And, I listened to a lot of this conversation from the Senate over the weekend multiple times. And a few hang-ups for me is my local telephone board CEO is asking me to oppose this bill, as well as the general organization that represents them, and I appreciate their testimony today. I think if we're going to do a broad sweeping regulation like this, all those parties, the local and the nationals, the wired and the wireless, need to be in the room working together to make this policy work. And it sounds like it's not going to work right now. And without speaking for another more than 30 seconds, I was educated in the telecom industry growing up. My step grandfather was the general manager of our Triotel in Salem and Hanson became McCook, and Hanson became Triotel when those two merged, and he was the CEO up until his death. And so I know if he was alive, he'd be here today, if he was still in that role advocating against this bill. And again, I have a ton of respect. I'm a customer of them. I'm a customer of one of the national wireless companies. This just doesn't seem to work, so I'm going to resist the motion, and I will be supporting a motion of 41st.
All right, thank you, Representative Peterson. With that, we have a motion and a second on Senate Bill 110, do pass motion. All in favor say aye, opposed nay. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representatives Elward.
No.
Duffy is excused. Greenfield.
Aye.
Kaiser.
No.
Mullally.
Aye.
Knowles.
No.
Peterson.
No.
Schwans.
No.
Shorma.
No.
Yuri Balk.
Aye.
Weisgram.
No.
Baumler.
No.
Lems.
No.
Madam Chair, we have 3 yea, 9 nay, 1 excused.
All right, with that, having not received a majority of the members elect, Senate Bill 110, do pass motion fails.
Madam Chair,
Representative Baumler.
I move 41st day.
Okay, we have a motion moved to the 41st day by Representative Baumler, second by Representative Weisgram. Discussion on your motion. Okay, she already said it. So with that, we have a send to the 41st day motion with Senate Bill 110. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Representatives Elward.
Aye.
Duffy excused. Greenfield.
Aye.
Kaiser.
Aye.
Mullally.
No.
Knowles.
Aye.
Peterson.
Aye.
Schwans.
Aye.
Shorma.
Aye.
Yuri Balk.
No.
Weisgram.
Aye.
Baumler.
Aye.
Lems.
Aye.
Madam Chair, we have 10 yea, 2 nay, 1 excused.
Having received a majority of the members elect, motion to send Senate Bill 110 to the 41st day passes. All right, with that, we wrap up our meeting for today. We will meet on Wednesday. We will have 2 bills, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Representative Weisgram, motion to adjourn, second by Representative Knowles. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Meeting is adjourned.
From choir to debate to theater, SDPB shines a spotlight on South Dakota's talented students through SDHSAA All-State Fine Arts Programming. Good, useful, and full of wonder. SDPB. Every day, SDPB connects South Dakotans with stories that inform, inspire, and bring us together. SDPB, good, useful, and full of wonder.